Russell Wilson and George Pickens went off on Sunday night in their first game together. We react to the best and worst fantasy performances in Week 7 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. All right, we're through week 7 of the fantasy season. Well, we got 2 more games tonight, but mostly through week 7. We're going to go through the best performances, worst performances, and some shocking performances to help you get ready for waiver wire pickups for tomorrow. But let's start with the best performances of the week. I mean, we had it last night, right? And we did not expect this going into the Steelers game, but Russell Wilson in his first start with the Steelers, he's the quarterback 1 on the week so far in fantasy with 25 fantasy points, scores 3 times. And then George Pickens goes off for 111 yards and a touchdown. Like, they look great together.
Yeah, this is the biggest reason that they wanted to make this move, to unlock George Pickens. And this is what they noticed all off-season long before they got into training camp and before Wilson got hurt, that this was a connection that they wanted to get going. It was supposed to be hyped up with Kenny Pickett. It fell flat last year. So this is good, like this combination. And what you saw later is other things started to open up, right? You saw, oh, here's Van Jefferson. He's part of this offense. Okay, that's good to know. There's a running game here between Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. That's come alive the past 2 weeks. They get the Giants coming up, by the way, who were just run all over by the Eagles with Saquon Barkley and Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Hurts. So this is all really good for the Steelers offense, the momentum going forward. And look, Mike Tomlin's a great coach. He is going to make a right move, and he just felt it. And this was the right thing to do, and you saw why. And it was not like it was a walk in the park matchup. I understand it kind of became that way as the Jets defense kind of fell apart, especially on the back end, and things could happen. But early wasn't that easy. And so this is what Russell Wilson can do. He can help you through a high degree of difficulty. He's very aggressive. He's confident what he can do. And we had Jaylen Warren as our sleeper, so we're happy that he came through pretty well, and he looked healthy finally for the first time in quite a while. So everything is pointing up with this Steelers offense. And look, I don't know if they're going to go and get a second receiver. I think that would certainly help. I don't think they can get by with Jefferson or Calvin Austin or even Roman Wilson if he ever gets healthy. But at this point, I don't know if they're going to be aggressive to do that. I think now that Pickens is working here with Wilson.
Yeah, I hope they can go grab someone. I don't really know
I
who's
think
available.
Someone, yeah.
Maybe Cooper Kupp, you know.
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
eyeing him. That would be a great ad for, but
Oh my gosh,
I mean,
that'd be
against
crazy.
that would be great. Against the Giants next week, though, I think Russell Wilson's an option. You're going to be excited to start George
Yeah.
Pickens. Now, Darnell Washington might be a sneaky, tight end that you might be able to grab too. He was one of Russell Wilson's favorite targets in this game. Going to be interesting, but at least the Russell Wilson makes the Steelers offense at least more fun to watch as they have been the last 3 years. So that's a lot of fun. And now moving on to some running backs, we had monster games. The top 3 performances of the week go to Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who's actually the running back 1 on the week. But Saquon, he got revenge on the Giants, right? 176 rushing yards and a touchdown. Gets the Bengals next week, but he's been fantastic. Joe Mixon, another huge game. I mean, his 3 full games he's played this year, he has now finished as the running back 2, 2, and 3. So he's been a steal. He's killing CJ Stroud's value, but he's been an absolute steal in drafts. And then Jahmyr Gibbs just did what we know he can do when he gets the workload. 116 yards. He gets the 2 rushing touchdowns, not David Montgomery this week. But 3 great week for those guys. It's actually Joe Mixon is the running back 2 in points per game on the season this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting rewarded if you invested nicely in RB1s and RB2s. The teams that actually made that a priority, no matter who they were, and then also went out on the waiver wire and got running backs as early as you could when you can see things developing there. But if you invest in backs, you're pretty happy, unless you took Christian McCaffrey. But everyone else is feeling it now. Brees Hall came alive for the Jets. You had Bijan start to do some things here as well in recent weeks. Kenneth Walker has been killing it. So there's just so many running backs that are putting up numbers that Derrick Henry hasn't even played this week. And we saw the big numbers everywhere. J.K. Dobbins, another one that's done really well. So again, running backs, I wouldn't say they were ever gone, but I think they're back in a big way where wide receivers have been fickle and volatile, quarterbacks have been up and down, but these running backs, a lot of them are getting like massive touches. And if they are, then you got to play them every week. There are going to be some disappointing weeks. Saquon is a little bit up and down of the guys who went off, but these guys are just going to be in your lineup to help you. And what I like is that you have enough for flex plays right now. So RB1, RB2 flex, plenty of depth. All of a sudden, there wasn't really a running back dead zone if you look at the draft.
Yeah, and that you mentioned grabbing guys off of waivers. Two guys that you got
Yeah.
off waivers this year, Tank Bigsby, Kareem Hunt, both had great fantasy weeks. Bigsby with 26 carries. He gets into the end zone twice, puts up 118 rushing yards. You keep playing him, especially as long as Travis Etienne is out. But even when Etienne is back, he's still a good play. But gets the Packers next week. Joe Mixon just beat up on them. Like you
Yeah.
play Tank Bigsby moving forward. And then Kareem Hunt, as long as say Pacheco's out, Hunt is in your starting lineup, gets 22 carries, not super efficient, only 78 yards, but got 2 rushing
Yeah.
touchdowns. Like he is their everything as a back. He did get 2 targets. Only Samaje P. Ryan saw a target out of this backfield. So Kareem Hunt, Tank
Raiders
Bigsby,
next, so
great
that's
grabs
good.
off of
Yeah.
waivers.
Yeah, and the matchups seem to get better. You talked about Saquon versus the Bengals. Gibbs gets the Titans this week. It's all over the board. Great. Mixon gets the Colts. So all this stuff could continue this week, and Hunt going against that Raiders D. So I love it. They could easily have big games, all of these guys again next week.
Yep. Now, this wide receiver didn't have a huge game, but I wanted to talk about him in this section because Amari Cooper, he plays just 34% of the snaps in his first game with the Bills, which was expected, but he actually puts up a pretty good fantasy day. 4 receptions, 66 yards, a touchdown. He did have a big drop in there as well. Could have been even a bigger day. But yeah, Amari Cooper seems like in this Bills offense, if he's doing this already on these limited snaps, I'm excited to have Amari Cooper moving forward.
Yeah, I think this was the big part of what Amari Cooper can do. He can get open and take advantage of some matchups to open up the rest of the field. We saw that. Dalton Kincaid made a few big plays. Of course, he had Keon Coleman go off. He found a lot of space to stretch the field here. And he's going to be one of the guys that you're going to target on the waiver wire. A lot of people gave up on him, but Amari Cooper's unlocked all these guys, much like Russell Wilson has unlocked more of the Steelers' offense. You have Amari Cooper now. You give Josh Allen legitimate veteran number one. So not only did Amari come through, but these other guys actually were very good, and it's because of his presence. So that's what you're looking at, Michelle. Like, hey, say DeAndre Hopkins comes to Pittsburgh, right? That would be great because it's a guy that you have to respect, and you know you can get open. That just helps the other guys downfield. So maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers will kind of copycat the Bills a little bit, but we said that this Cooper move could have a lot more impact than Devontae Adams, and so far that is paid up here. So I love it. The Bills are a team that you're going to just ride every week now with more of these regular weapons coming through.
Yeah, Keon Coleman's a guy we'll talk about in our final segment when we talk about the surprise performances, but put up 125 yards. So we'll discuss if we think that's because Amari Cooper is there helping him out. We'll get into that in a little bit. 2 tight ends I want to hit on here. David Njoku, 14 targets, 10 receptions, 76 yards, and a touchdown. Huge game from him. And now he gets Jameis Winston as his quarterback because Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles. Yeah, we think it's Winston. It should be Winston. Deshaun Watson went down with Achilles injury. He'll be out for the season. But Cedric Tillman's another guy we're going to talk about later. But David Njoku caught a touchdown as soon as Winston gets in this game. Winston provides so much more upside to this offense. So, yeah, it's David Njoku's an every week tight end starter with Hunter Henry now playing with Drake May. I mean, second good fantasy day in a row. 8 receptions, 92 yards. Doesn't get the touchdown this week like he did the week prior, but Drake May, he's his go-to target. Especially, unfortunately, Demario Douglas had a sickness, so he didn't play for the most of the game. That was Very
Yeah, that's a
upsetting.
bummer.
Yeah, but there is 3 tough matchups coming up for the Patriots offense: Jets, Titans, and Bears. Not like the happiest, you don't feel the best about throwing in these guys, but I think Hunter Henry is a good play moving forward as long as May's the starting quarterback.
Yeah, the Jets are not as scary. I mean, the Steelers had some success making a downfield play with Pat Fryermuth. You mentioned involving other tight ends, so you can throw on them. They're also getting weak at safety. That's the other thing is that should be the open in the middle of the field, right, with linebacker and safety. So I think Hunter Henry can keep it up. I think it's a rough go now that they're spreading the ball around at wide receiver a little bit. So Hunter Henry is going to be there. When is the last time Hunter Henry was this good? He had a rookie first round quarterback named Mac Jones, and he was scoring a lot of touchdowns. So, rookie quarterbacks for the Patriots like to target the security blanket tight ends. That's happening with David Njoku. He reminds me a lot of Josh Downs, and here's why. You know that he was just sitting there, right, getting targets and wanted to have a bigger impact. He has it immediately once you get a pocket passer that's throwing to him. Same thing with Josh Downs. Joe Flacco's in there, they're doing it. Watson wasn't moving around, extending plays, doing anything with him. So this is a great change for Njoku, much like we want to see Flacco back out there for Josh Downs, because again, these pocket passers tend to help and get these guys the ball, especially in the intermediate routes.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into the most disappointing performances of the week. Some offenses just completely fell apart, and a really bad week for quarterbacks in general. We'll get into that right after a quick break. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. As an adult, do you make the time to learn new things as often as you'd like? Or was that lost in childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any age. I'll tell you right now, therapy definitely helped me find the confidence in starting my own fantasy football podcast to get into this industry, to give me the confidence and interest of writing fantasy football. Like, I would not be where I am today without online therapy. And that's the truth. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you don't have to stress because you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Give online therapy a try and get on your way to being your best self. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the US Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including these are some of the few courses that they offer, but not limited to: Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution; Introduction to Free Market Economics; The Great American Story, A Land of Hope; The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic; and a brand new documentary style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. So the biggest disappointments of the week might honestly just be the quarterback position in general. Only 4 quarterbacks scored over 20 fantasy points. Only 5 scored more than 17 fantasy points. When Brock Purdy is the quarterback 7 on the week with 3 interceptions and 0 passing touchdowns, you know there's an issue. And still your boy, Patrick Mahomes, still came and finished as a top 12 guy. Still the quarterback 14 on the week with 12 fantasy points. But just wanted to hit on that. It's not been a friendly week to quarterbacks. So let's talk about the Texans passing game because it was gross. CJ Stroud finishes with 5 fantasy points. Stephon Diggs, 5 receptions, 23 yards, and 7 targets. Tank Dell, 4 targets, 0 receptions. So just atrocious. Joe Mixon got all of the fantasy points. Are you worried about them? They do get a nice matchup against the Colts next week.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess the dead zone was really a quarterback in the middle, like Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. We told you, like, there's some better values. Now, we want Kyler Murray to keep it up here and try to get back on track. Yeah, maybe with Marvin Harrison, he'll do that here on Monday night. But yeah, we thought this was a bit of a dead zone. Just go after Jaden Daniels, go after Caleb Williams. We thought that would be the case. Even Brock Purdy, he's compiling, right? It's not always pretty, but you can find a lot of great values later, and Purdy has done that. And then you look deeper, Bo Nix has been a very valuable fantasy commodity. But in the end, you have Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, the guys that typically come through. Those are the guys that you can trust the most right now. Lamar Jackson here tonight. So when you look at this, I mean, the Stroud thing was weird, right? To throw for less than 100 yards.
86 yards.
Yeah, this is just very weird that they're become a great running team all of a sudden, and they're just trying to win that way. Like, I didn't expect that to happen with this offense. I know they don't have Nico Collins, but that shouldn't just break apart their pass game. Now, I feel like they might stay run heavy, right? Playing the Colts next week. They're not going to get a shootout with Richardson and Stroud. So they may be like, here, Joe Mixon, we can handle it defensively. So it could be another tough game because, again, they don't seem to care about getting CJ Stroud his numbers, where I think that was completely the opposite. Maybe they're just trying to do whatever they can to win games, and it almost got them the win, right? Playing that formula, but I don't get it. Like, everyone says just to gloss over this, but again, we said CJ Stroud has struggled quite a bit to put up the numbers we're looking for. So a little bit of concern, a little bit of sophomore slump, a little bit of people catching up to him. So just be careful, but I still think you play him against the Colts. I just think be wary that they can run all over this team as well.
Yeah, that's the issue. They could run all over them, but the Colts aren't putting up points,
Yeah,
and they're going to keep running. But Stroud is the Colts
yeah,
killer. Like, he always
yeah.
destroys the Colts and put up
Let's hope
huge,
so.
huge fantasy points. So I still think you have to stick with him. But Tank Dell is not a playable guy, I guess. I don't know. Like, you can't just keep taking these
Yeah,
zeros from him. The Giants offense, I don't know if they have anyone playable moving forward besides Malik Neighbors, who he's still had a bad game. 4 receptions, 41 yards, 8 targets against the Eagles. The Eagles defense just completely had a stranglehold. No one did anything in this offense. The running game stunk. Daniel Jones stunk. They go to Pittsburgh next week. So I'm not playing a single Giants player besides Malik Neighbors. And I don't expect a great week from Neighbors, but you're still going to play him.
yeah. This is a weird stat for you, Michelle, and you will actually like it. Like, Daniel Jones has been bad in fantasy and reality. He's been QB 21. Do you know who's right behind him at QB 22?
Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes. So this tells you how reality and fantasy really differ, right? I mean, at this stage, Mahomes is a great reality quarterback, not a very good fantasy quarterback. Daniel Jones, I think, falls in the bucket of not being good at either at this point. So I don't know what to say. They're sticking with him as the starting quarterback. Brian Dable just said that, but I don't necessarily see him doing well against the Steelers defense on the road on Monday night next week. So this could be it for Daniel Jones starting. They might have to see what they have in Drew Lock before they move on to another quarterback in the draft, because you can't have Malik Neighbors shut down. You can't have Tyrone Tracy do nothing. These guys were doing something right before, but if he's regressing the offense, I think they have to make a change. And really disappointing game overall for the Giants. It's almost like they just sat and watched Saquon Barkley and just took it, and that's it. They didn't care about the game. So I don't know. The Steelers matchups, crisis mode. We're going to hope for the best for Neighbors, hope for the best for Tracy, but that's about it.
Yep. 49ers offense, a disaster. Brock Purdy looked terrible. I love Brock Purdy. But I think I know he had that 4 interception game last year against the Ravens. I think this was his worst game of his career. He just was throwing terrible balls, making terrible decisions. It didn't end up being the worst fantasy week for him because he scored 2 rushing touchdowns.
Go figure.
Yeah, he still put up 17 fantasy points. So it's not like he killed you, but and then George Kittle also had a nice week, 6 for 92. We lose Brandon Ayuk. What it looks like for the entire season, it looks like he tore his ACL. Ricky Pearsall becomes a very interesting pickup, but Jordan Mason had another bad week. 58 rushing yards, nothing through the air, really. 2 receptions, 11 yards, no touchdowns. And I think this injury, we'll get into that in a second here, but George Kittle, he's going to be boosted up. Deebo Samuel didn't even play in this game because of an illness. He'll be boosted a bit, but Ricky Pearsall definitely is an interesting guy to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, this is not just Ayuk going down. Jawan Jennings didn't play.
Yep.
Debo, as you mentioned, was out. George Kittle was just on an island making plays. There was nobody else. I mean, Cowing's a guy that they haven't really thrown a lot to. And then you have Ronnie Bell. The connection seemed off between him and Purdy. And then you have Pierce Hall. I mean, he was having a traumatic event before the start of the season, so he's getting up to speed. And he's just a rookie. He's a first rounder, and they got to throw to somebody. But what I think is going to happen is they're going to go totally run heavy as much as possible. Maybe get more carries involved. They get the Cowboys, who have been a vulnerable run defense. They've tightened things up, and I think they'll do some more after the bye. So that's not an easy matchup anymore, right? When you don't have these weapons, and the Cowboys defense can be tricky. So I'm not sure I can really trust Purdy in that matchup and believe that he's going to get 27 yards on the ground and 2 scores to work himself out of it. But I think the 49ers had to reinvent themselves, take calculated shots to Kittle. And we'll see about Debo coming back. But man, everyone's gone down for this offense.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's always that year, every few years, for Kyle Shanahan with the injuries. And this might be it, given their record is now 3-4.
Now, Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle do nothing. Tyreek Hill gets 2 targets on the game, just ridiculous. 1 reception, 8 yards. Jaylen Waddle, 2 targets as well. 1 reception, 11 yards. But it's Tua's coming back
Tua
to
time.
practice this week on Wednesday. It seems like he'll be back for week 8. They get the Cardinals. You just throw him right back in with Tua.
Yeah, the encouraging sign is their running back started to look better. I mean, I know there wasn't a good game, but they took advantage of the matchup at least. Devin Achane and Raheem Mostert, even a little bit of Jalen Wright. I think this could be better down the line for the running game as well. So, yeah, everything's going to come back to life. The Cardinals matchup, I mean, you look at the total, there is a hope that should tell you. I mean, it's close to 50 that says that Tua is going to likely return this week. It makes Hill completely different, right? This Cardinals defense stinks. So all of a sudden, these guys, there's help if you've been struggling with those guys. But man, those aren't the only guys who put up some ridiculously bad numbers here, unplayable numbers here in this week.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden Reed, Jamison Williams, and Devonta Smith.
Oh my
Williams
gosh.
and Smith, it would have been better if you just didn't play them.
Yeah,
It's
that's
negative
right.
4 yards
They,
for
they
Williams.
hurt your team.
Yeah, negative 2 yards from Smith. Now, Smith gets the Bengals next week. I'm going right back to him. It was just one of those games where Saquon Barkley just destroyed the Giants. They didn't need a pass. A.J. Brown had a fine day, but I'm going right back to Devonta Smith. Jamison Williams, this is just what you're going to get from him sometimes. He's going to have the big games. He's going to have the down games. It gets the Titans, who just allowed Keon Coleman to have big plays, Amari Cooper. So I think with Williams, you just got to keep plugging him in. You're going to have to take these down ones. Jaden Reed, it's been a few weeks since he's been good. 2 receptions, 10 yards, but they get the Jaguars next week. So it's going to be really, really hard to keep him on the bench. I think I'm going to go right back to him as well.
Yeah, just some disappointing there, guys, overall. And again, some of these teams just went nuts running, and that hurts all their numbers, right? Tank Dell, you included. So I think they all fall in that same boat if their teams run. And with the Lions, a couple things that happened there. They introduced Khalif Raymond. Jahmyr Gibbs just went dominant in this game. And it's funny, all these things are happening in games where Jared Goff has been super sharp, and you're not seeing the numbers here. But what happened is they took away the deep ball, the Vikings, with their pressure. They kind of forced them to hold it. But that would have said that Sam Laporta would have had a big game. That didn't happen. So something's a little bit off there. Only 2 targets, 1 catch, 25 yards. Is it time for him to see the bench? I don't know if I go there. They are playing the Titans this week. Again, it's just maybe this Lions offense is too good where they can distribute to everybody.
I know, I don't know what to do with Sam Laporta. 1 reception, 25 yards, 2 targets. That's the issue. He's not seeing the work. I mean, this year it's been since week 2, 3 targets, 2 targets, 4 targets, 1 target, 2 targets. He's on the field. I mean, he's playing 93% of the snaps. They're just not using him. And he only has 1 touchdown in the season too, unlike last year where he's getting them. At this point, it's just a name on his back that you're playing him, because if he didn't have that rookie season, we'd be saying this guy's not playable, right? So hopefully things can turn around. I don't know what you do with him. I guess unless you can find unless you picked up Tucker Kraft during the season, maybe you can get cutesy with a couple of these guys we're going to talk about in our next segment and hope that they keep performing. But it's not been nice for Sam Laporta fantasy managers.
He's the Patrick Mahomes of tight ends, really. We keep ranking him pretty high, and why? We don't know. I think, yeah, you make a good point. Sometimes you have to forget the name on the back and just look at the data and the usage and the production and say, wait, maybe the Lions just have too many weapons. Goff is locked in. He's playing so well that he's not just, oh, I got to throw a name on Russ Brown and Laporta each week. No, he can expand the repertoire. He can stretch the field with different guys, and by committee, they can just torch you with Gibbs and Montgomery. So Lions again, it could be the same thing, right? Lions and Chiefs just might be too good, and that can sometimes hurt us, right? Because things are not funneled. Same thing. Travis Kelce can have another quiet game with Noah Gray going off because this team is just that good. So maybe some of these, it's weird, right? You don't want a bad team, but you also don't want a great team where they can do whatever they want each week. So weird thing of fantasy, but it's fantasy. You'll get better, and Laporta's too talented, but they're playing the Titans, so hopefully everyone will go off this week. Now, we will look at some of the guys, again, pre-look at the waiver wire, some injuries we also have to discuss there that are going to create opportunities. We'll do that in our final segment on this Monday show. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, it's week 7. It's about to be week 8. We're getting very close to the halfway point of the 2024 season. If you haven't been getting on the action with these games, you should. Hey, this is a perfect time, right? You have a Monday night doubleheader tonight, so you can get on the action. I do like the Buccaneers as a home underdog to cover that. I think the spread is now at 3.5, so get that. I think the Buccaneers will play well against the Ravens. And then you look at the Chargers, I think they'll take care of business. It's a great matchup for them against the Cardinals as a running team against a bad run defense. So that's where I'm leaning tonight's game with the covers, the Buccaneers and Chargers, but you can make your own bets there. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's only at FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Michelle, a couple injury notes here. It looks like Jaden Daniels will be okay. He had a ribs injury. By the time they kind of figured it out in the locker room, the Commanders were running and doing whatever they wanted on the Panthers. So he gave a thumbs up, ran off the field. I think he'll be okay, and he's going to be motivated. He wants to play in that matchup against Caleb Williams, that's for sure. Prime game there with CBS next week. Deshaun Watson, we know, is done for the season. We talked about Jameis Winston likely going to start over Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Brent Ayuk just waiting there, but likely a torn ACL. Good news in another NFC West roster, right? DK Metcalf, he was carted off the field, but looks like it's, quote, a minor knee injury. So we could see him on the field this week. So I like that. So again, Ayuk went down, Watson went down, and these are going to happen. So those are the injuries there. But luckily, there's some help for you in the waiver wire. Now, this is probably the last call for Drake May. This is 2 straight games for him in a row. That's it. I'm not going to play him probably against the Jets this week, but he's a good guy to have on your bench, right? He's producing. He was the QB3, by the way, this week. So we liked him as a sleeper, finished real high. Do you think Drake May is just worth just having on your roster at this point, even if you're not streaming him?
I thought he looked good. I mean,
Yeah.
especially in the first half, it kind of fell apart after that, just for the team in general, and the Patriots defense couldn't stop the Jaguars. But it'll for next week, it'll determine if the Jets secondary gets healthy or not, right? Because if it's going to be the defense they threw out there against the Steelers, then Drake May can be just fine. But yeah, 2 good fantasy games over 2 NFL starts, so very, very promising for him. He should be picked up, maybe not played this week, but on your bench, especially if you have a struggling starting quarterback or Jaden Daniels, who, yeah, it looks like maybe the rib injury, he should be fine, but maybe he does miss. Just like have it for backup. Now let's get into some of these wide receivers that had really good days that you could consider picking up. Keon Coleman, 125 receiving yards. He also plays on 75% of the snaps. His playing time was going down as of recently, but goes way back up. With Amari Cooper even there. So they get the Seahawks this week. You know, they're a beatable secondary. Keon Coleman, he's an option.
Yeah, this is going to be great for the running backs in this game, by the way. James Cook came back, looked good. You had Ray Davis, and then the other side, Kenneth Walker went off. So that could be a sneaky good play for all the running backs involved. yet again another hot running back game. But Keon Coleman can definitely beat that secondary again. Amari Cooper draws attention. You have to go to him because he's a veteran. He's going to get open. So I love that, and got to credit the Bills. This was a great pickup for them. And Coleman, look, he looks good. I knew he was a good player. He slipped into the second round for some unforeseen issues that I didn't see coming there in the draft. I always liked him as a first rounder. So the Bills have a good one here for a few years, and this time he's very playable in the short term.
Two other wide receivers. We really liked Romeo Dobbs this last week, and maybe he already got picked up last week,
Yeah.
but definitely a guy that can be played, I think, moving forward. 10 targets, 8 receptions, 94 receiving yards. And again, he gets the Jaguars. As I mentioned, Jayden Reed, like I'm going to throw him back in even after a disappointing week, but 10 targets for Dobbs. And then the week prior to that, he had the 2 receiving touchdowns. It seems like the squeaky wheel that he was very upset about his workload. It's worked, right? They're starting to use him. He's producing, and now he gets an amazing matchup coming up. So if he is still sitting on waivers, that's going to be a top priority this week.
Yeah, this is getting to be also an annoying offense, right? Jayden Reed was the man. Then we liked Christian Watson. He did nothing. Then Tucker Kraft was in a tough matchup, but he scored a touchdown. So that game. And then Dontavian Wicks resurfaced to score. Again, Jordan Love, stop spreading the ball around all these guys. Find your guys. But I think his guy, if you look at the evidence, as Michelle said, I think his guys really are Reed and Dubs as much as possible. The other guys, he's going to look and find this schematic openings here, but this is 2 good games in a row from Dubs. And you could tell after the game that Jordan Love really likes Romeo. Maybe it's love Romeo thing. I don't know. But he's this, I think, his favorite receiver when not thrown to Jayden Reed. So he's the one guy I trust over Watson and Wicks for sure. Now, Cedric Tillman, this was a bit of an oversight by me a little bit to not think about Cedric Tillman. Speaking of the Amari Cooper effect, right? That someone's going to have to go there because it was not going to be Jerry Jeudy or Elijah Moore. We knew that wasn't the case. They can't play the same position, but Cedric Tillman looked really good, Michelle, and I think having Winston out there with Njoku might really help him going forward.
Yeah, he finally got playing time. So he's a third round drafted guy from last year. Cedric Tillman is in his second season, has not played more than 30% of the snaps all season long until this last week. He plays 82% of the snaps, gets 12 targets, 8 receptions, 81 yards. They get the Ravens next week that have been giving up a ton of passing yards and receiving yards to wide receivers. And then with Jameis Winston there, I think Cedric Tillman might, like, that's the sneaky best play of the week that you really should be keeping an eye on, because I don't think it's just like a random lucky week for him. The playing time went up, the production was there, and once he got his opportunity, he stepped into it. We know Amari Cooper's gone. That role had to go to someone else. It looks like it's going to Cedric Tillman. If it was going to be Deshaun Watson the rest of the year, I'd be like, I don't really know if I care, but Winston will throw it up to Tillman. So very, very interesting guy to keep an eye on. And then at tight end, Jatavian Sanders, rookie tight end, 4th rounder this year. He's had second straight solid week. He goes 6 receptions for 61 yards this past week. Denver next week. The Panthers say they're sticking with Andy Dalton. So there's that at least. But it's good to see Sanders is starting to be used. He had 7 targets in week 6, 6 targets in week 7, like starting to actually be on the field and getting used a lot.
Yeah, and this is what you would call for the Browns and the Panthers that help the young players evaluation mode. So we're looking at who do we want for next year, who's going to be the guy we carry around here when we turn the page at quarterback, and this is what these teams are going to do. They have to look for a new starting quarterback there. So, okay, Cedric Tillman, I should say, is one of their guys, right, in Cleveland. And same thing, Jatavian Sanders, you invest a good pick. You also have had these guys, Ian Thomas and Tommy Tremble, who have done nothing, and now they're headed to free agency. So you need to look at your young guys. You might as well play your young guys and see what you have. I mean, we thought it could be a little bit more Xavier Legette, but what's happening is this passing game can't really push the ball downfield. So Sanders is getting involved quite a bit. So evaluation mode says blow up everything we had. And the Panthers were already there, right? The Browns have joined them now with Watson out for the season. I think they're fully there, and that's good for the young players. So look for more teams. There could be the Titans out there, these 1-win, 2-win teams. The Raiders are probably going to follow suit here pretty soon. Just look for that, because then the youth movement is going to happen to all these teams, especially when these teams are taking hits.
Now, the opposite of a youth movement is Jonnu Smith, who finishes as the tight end 1 so far in the week. 7 receptions, 96 yards, and a touchdown. Tyler Huntley loves his tight ends. We saw that back when he
Yeah.
was with the Ravens with Mark Andrews. When Tua's back, like we know he doesn't love his tight ends, and we know he's going to actually target Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle like any good quarterback would. So Johnny Smith, I think I'm fine with just keeping him on waivers.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not a good streaming situation. Again, the Cardinals typically have been bad against the tight end, but they've been better this year for some particular reason. So when you look at that, maybe it's often related to the corners, right? If the corners stink, you're just going to pick on them and not worry about throwing to the tight end as much. And I think that definitely is the case with this situation. So Jonnu, yeah, don't chase the points here with Jonnu. New quarterback situation. It's like chasing the points with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in a negative sense. Go all in on them. Go away from Jonnu.
Yep. That is it for today's episode. Thank you to all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers will be back tomorrow. We're going to dig way more into the waiver wire, kind of rank these guys and our priorities, and then also hit on anything that happened in tonight's games. If you got some big fantasy stuff there. If you're in your close matchup, I hope you win tonight. Enjoy the 2 games. Bye, y'all.